and welcome back to the OperaWire podcast. I am David Salazar here with my co-host and founder, Francisco Salazar. We are so happy to be back. It has been some time since our last episode, and there's a lot to catch up on and discuss. So let me just bring him in right now. Fran, how are you doing?
Good. A little jet lagged, I must say. I just got back 2 days ago from Italy. I was
Yes.
on a whirlwind tour of operas around the world, and it was quite fascinating and a lot of fun. Tiring, but I'm here. I'm back in New York, ready for some wonderful performances and wonderful activities that will be this fall season.
Yeah, so let's just get into that. Why don't you just walk us through? I had a couple of opera performances, but I don't think I had quite the breadth of superstar power that you kind of went through. Just walk us through your adventures so that we can so we can catch up.
So, the Zurich Opera gave us a wonderful invitation to go to the opening weekend of the Opera House. I'd never been to Zurich in my entire life, so I said, this is an opportunity to go to Zurich and to discover the city, but not only that, to see the Opera House, which is absolutely a jewel box. It's so gorgeous inside. It's very intimate. It's a smaller space than, the Metropolitan Opera or a lot of other houses, but it was just such a wonder to walk into that house and to see the decor, but also to see the space and how close you are to the performers. So the first performance that I went to was an Elina Garancha recital, which was also being accompanied by Matthias Schultz, who's the new general director of the Zurich Opera. So it was a really wonderful program of Schumann and Brahms, and she also added a couple of arias, Saint-Saëns' Samson and Delilah aria, the habanera, which obviously she's become very famous for her Carmen, and a Spanish song by Manuel de Falla, and a couple of Latvian songs. And she was bringing back her own culture. So it was a very unique program. I had just literally gotten off the plane when I got to the to the recital, so I was a little bit like, okay, what is this gonna look like? But her artistry is just so undeniably unique and special that she just brought me into the recital, and so I didn't really feel whatsoever that jet lag that I had when I was going there. Um, and then the next day, I went to the dress rehearsal for Manon, which was opening a few days later, and that was with Lisette Oropeza and Benjamin Bernheim. These two artists, I obviously have seen them at the Met many times, but there was just something really special to see them in such a much smaller space and being able to feel them so close. Their voices are just so powerful, and they resonate with such, I don't know, such expression in this work. Lisette, we obviously saw her role debut here at the Met in Manon, but it's the role that's just gotten so much better for her and her voice and her vocal powers. And Benjamin Bernheim, I think, is just outstanding in the French repertoire. His voice is so I don't know how to describe it. It's just beautiful. It's gorgeous, but so expressive. And the Sounds to Please scene, I mean, he just completely knocked it out of the park. And then there's obviously the scene in the casino, which was just so dramatic. And the final scene, I'm not a big fan of what they decided to do with the production at the end, but
I was gonna
oh my
ask you
God.
what was the production of that? I
It
mean,
was very
you said
minimalist. It was a
okay.
minimalist production. It was also very traditional in costumes. But the end of the opera, there was this whole thing where they all lifted up glasses and the chorus was there. It kind of felt distracting. Such an intimate scene, this duet, final duet where Manon dies. And the chorus and supernumeraries were in the background. And it's just like, I don't really need this. I would just want to focus on Manon and Degria and their final moments. And so that was a little distracting, but I think because Benjamin Bernheim and Lisette Lopez are just such amazing artists, I forgot about it. So I was very excited to be able to uh, enjoy that dress rehearsal. I would have loved to see the opening performance because the dress rehearsal there was a couple of things with the chorus that they were still figuring out, which obviously is what happens in dress rehearsals. But it was enjoyable. I really really loved it. I felt like I was in a performance. It was just amazing. I mean, these are two of the best artists definitely right now in the world, and definitely
Especially in that repertoire, right?
yeah,
Especially
you
in
know
that
what I mean.
So then the
Yeah.
next day you went for the main event, which we talked about in the last
Yeah.
episode, and which was interesting because you are not a big Rosencavalier
No,
lover.
no, I was not a big Rosencavalier lover. And I walked in knowing very well that Rosenkavalier is an opera that I've had a lot of difficulty with in the past. But I have to report that I thoroughly enjoyed this Rosenkavalier. I mean, there were moments where it was like, okay, let's move on, but especially in the first act. But oh my God, this Rosenkavalier was just so amazing. Diana Damrau was singing the Marschallin, and she's performed this already in Munich. And she just brings you in, and you understand her plight as a character. And I think it really just really she has so much depth to her character because I think also the fact that she also did Sophie in her early years and now she's doing the Marshall, and I think she brings, I don't want to say the baggage, but she brings in that already knowing the work, knowing who these characters are. Obviously, she's in a different part of her career than when she did Sophie, so it just feels like she's bringing so much of that expertise of this repertoire to her Marshallin, and
Mm.
also that I think I described it in my review, like she's passing along those parts that she was so well known to now to the younger generation. So in a way, it felt like she was living the character. I don't know, that's just how I felt, but she just brought so much depth to it. Her voice is still really strong. I think it really works for this size theater. I don't think it would work for a bigger theater because it's never been the biggest sound, but it definitely resonates with a lot of power. Gunther Grossbach, is
I
I think
mean,
the
I think
best
he's
Baronox in
the
the world.
definitive right now. Yeah, exactly.
I think
Exactly.
that there's no better Baronox, and he has so much charisma, but also just a lot of like that. I don't know. like, he's very malicious in the way that he portrays this character, but then also very bombastic and funny and like sarcastic. There's so much nuance to the way that he portrays it, and of course he adds a lot of sexualism to this
Mm.
character that just adds a lot more to how gross you can portray a Baronox. Emily Pogolrick was outstanding when I saw her at the Met here in La Rondine, and she just adds so much strength to this character. It's not this of
Character
Sophie.
Sophie.
Sophia, she's not, this innocent girl. She was just very strong and very, decisive. She knew like, this is like a portrayal of a character that I never saw before. And some people said, oh, she lacked a little bit of the gleaming, floating high notes. And I said, well, you know what? It was not part of the way that she was portraying the character. And it flowed really well for me. I thought I really liked the way that she portrayed it. And Angela Brower, she had done her role debut a few years ago. We had actually interviewed her in Bogota when she was doing her role debut, and
Yeah.
I never seen her actually perform the role. So it's just really great to see her actually be able to do this. And she has a great voice. I mean, I absolutely love what she did with the voice. Bosch Goffes is another singer. I think that's how you pronounce his name. A singer who I've also followed for many years. Also a great voice and also a great portrayal of Fanny Nell. And the production by Lydia Steyer was actually quite inventive. It's kind of like this fantastical world where it meshes a bunch of different time periods. So it was a very fantastical, very Alice in Wonderland type thing. And so I kind of enjoyed that because I feel like you live in this, like there's a fantastical world of it to Rosencavalier. So I don't know, it worked for me. The conducting by Joanna Malwitz was also very good. Um, very ebb and flow, and I found that this was probably the first time that I thoroughly enjoyed a production and a performance of Rosencavalier, and I think it's because the cast that they brought together was just so all on the same level.
So now let's flip it. You went to London right after that, and you
I
saw an
did.
opera that you saw many years ago that I've never seen live, I Vespri Siciliani, in the
Yes,
French version, right? It was a
this is the
French
French
version.
version. It's been
Your
20
ex-
years since I
your
saw
ex-
this opera.
your experience was not as positive.
Well, it's not that it wasn't as positive. It was just that I felt a little disappointed. And I'm just gonna put it out there. This is a work that's never performed. And so when it's never performed, these are roles that barely anybody touches. So I was looking forward to Dracel Corey. I've never seen her. I admire her very much. I admire her career. And I know she had a week to prepare this role of Hélène. I'm just gonna put it out there. It wasn't my favorite performance of her. I think that part of it is because I think the tessitura is all over the place. She has three arias, and all three arias are like completely different. Plus, she has all the choral work that she has to do, ensemble work. And so there were moments, particularly in her last act, where the voice, I think, thinned out, where there was a lot of hesitancy, especially in the famous bolero that everybody knows, that just felt a little bit underwhelming. And it wasn't that it was a bad performance. I don't think it was. I just think that maybe in another Verdi role, she would work better, or maybe if she had more time to prepare it, or maybe in the Italian version. I don't know. Who knows? Because obviously singing in French is very different, and this role is a monster, and it's complicated for sure. Quinn Kelsey was spectacular in the role. Quinn Kelsey is an artist that's really grown on me. Since his Ballet Mascara here at the Met, I really have found that his work has become even more outstanding and more interesting. And I think he's just grown really much as that Verdi baritone that people really have expected him to grow into. So I really felt particularly his second act. Was it second or third act? The third act aria, which it was just so emotional and so amazing to listen to. Um, Ildebrando D'Arcangelo also was in the cast, and the tenor, who is this Ukrainian tenor. His name is blanking out on me, but he was definitely the standout of this cast. He did have a couple of minor issues, especially at the top. There's a really ridiculous, I think, D flat is it that he has to sing, and so that didn't really get pulled off. But for what's just one note. I mean, his voice is outstanding, and I think this is a major voice that we're definitely going to hear from in years to come. The production, not a big fan. I didn't understand it. I didn't get it. It actually just, quite frankly, kind of, I think, made the experience a little bit not as interesting. And this is one of Verdi's longest works.
And
And Speranza.
you mentioned that during the intermission, a lot of audience members seem to feel the same way.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people didn't really understand the story. I don't think the story is that complicated. And again, I don't think Trovatore is that complicated, but people were very confused about the story. People were not interested in the story, and they were also not very interested in the opera. I think the thing about Vespri Siciliani, it's a very weird work because it's very French. So it feels like a lot of what Verdi's writing is in the very French style, but at the same time, he's also bringing back a lot of the aria cavaletta structure that he used in the earlier works. So it's a very interesting, it's a very different work that if you hear it, you're not completely sure what Verdi's trying experimenting, and the identity may not be the same of that of Traviata or Trovatore or Rigoletto, and then later on as Simon Boccanegra and Don Carlo and La Forza del Destino. But it's definitely a work that I think you need a very coherent production for to really understand everything that's going on. And I don't think this production really was the most comprehensible and the best way to do it because it's set in a theater. And I really don't understand the theatrical point of it. But that's just really how I felt about it, and I know a lot of audience members did too, from hearing their comments during the intermission. Speranza Scapucci's conducting. It was interesting, sometimes a little messy, in my opinion. She's a good conductor. She's the guest conductor at the Royal Opera House, the principal guest conductor, and she does a lot of the Italian up there. I think there's still a lot of work that she definitely knows her Italian rep. I just think that sometimes it's a little bit not my cup of tea. That then again, she did lead the chorus numbers in just rousing ways. Particularly the Act Three finale, which I think is one of the most beautiful choral numbers that Verdi ever wrote.
And then after that, you did another Verdi opera.
I did. And one of the interesting things about the Royal Opera House and Verdi is that at the Royal Opera House, for some reason, the only works I've ever seen there are by Verdi. I've seen a Macbeth, a Trovatore, an Otello, a Traviata, and now Vespri Siciliani. So I continued my Verdi trajectory at the Royal Opera House. Very funny and interesting. But I have to say that Verdi, it seems to be the composer that follows me at the Royal Opera House. And to conclude my journey, of course, I did go to Lyon, and I got to experience and see the Lyon Opera. Unfortunately, there was no performances, and I also saw the Nice Opera, which is gorgeous, such a beautiful theater. I didn't get to see any performances because the season doesn't start till October. I made my way to the Teatro San Carlo di Napoli to go see Balla in Maschera. Obviously, this was a big event because it was the world debut of Anna Netrebko as Amelia. and also Ludovic Tetier was in the cast. Piero Preti, Elizabeth Deschamps was making her role debut and her house debut, and Cassandra Berton, I think that's her pronounce her name, were in the cast. The production was a traditional production that's been shown in Parma, and I think in Modena, if I'm not wrong. Wasn't a big fan. I don't love traditional productions that have nothing that to add to the story or that just feel a little gaudy. I felt like I was watching the Traviata production here at the Met with the same type of all over the top colorful costumes. It wasn't a big fan. And some of the conducting by Pinkas Steinberg, who we had seen in La Gioconda last year, was a little bit messy. And I think it
Yeah,
was
he was
because
not. I think he was messy last year too. So
yeah, and I think it's because there was a lack of rehearsal time. Anna was doing Tosca, Ludovic Tetier was doing Tosca in Vienna, and I was in Royal. So they really only had 1 week to really get the whole ensemble together. I know that the other cast members they had been there for a few weeks, so it was a very interesting thing. I think that the subsequent performances will probably be better. But overall, this was a really good experience. I think Piero Peretti, unfortunately, has a great voice, beautiful tone, but he paled in front of someone like Ludovic Tetier, who's just an incredible
monster.
vocal monster, vocal power. And it was funny because the only times I've ever seen Ludovic Tetier have been in Italy, and they've been with the Trepco in Forza and Gioconda, now Bal and Maschera. And then these two just, they have such a amazing chemistry, and their voices are humongous. Um, Anna was doing her Bala Maschera debut, and I was kind of interested to hear what it was going to sound like. Obviously, she's done more Verdi roles than she has of other composers, and I think this one really works really well for her current vocal capacity. She has the highs, she has the lows, and she can spin these beautiful pianos like nobody. I think in the industry. I think that artistically it was a triumph for me, and I think that it's a role that she'll continue to do definitely in this coming season, and I think it's going to definitely be even better than what I saw for the debut. And Tetier, I mean, I have nothing more to say that he's the best in this repertoire. I think right now, obviously, I love there's other great baritones too, but he's just the ultimate Verdi baritone. Elizabeth Deschamps, I mean, it's an
She's
amazing
incredible.
voice.
She's incredible. Every
Beautiful.
time I've seen her, she just manages to surprise me more and more.
It's a great voice. It's not the biggest sound. I think at least in this theater, it didn't feel like it. But oh my God, there was just so many colors that she added to this Ulrika, and artistically, I think it was definitely also a highlight for this performance. And these three will go to Paris to do it again, and that one's going to go to cinemas. But overall, it was a solid performance. I enjoyed it. I was happy to be able to experience this plethora of artists, and amazing to be able to go to Europe and experience all of these great performances and performers.
Yeah. And obviously, you came back. We don't have to talk about it because I know it wasn't a great experience for you. So La Sonambula at the Met. I did. I saw two operas at the Met as well to open the season, and I had much more favorable experiences. I saw The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay on opening night, and then I saw Turandot a week later. And I have to say that both experiences were great. They were both wonderful for different reasons. I think Cavalier and Clay, we talked a little bit about
We did.
how we haven't necessarily been in love with a lot of the new contemporary operas that the Met has presented. And obviously, this is based on a Pulitzer Prize winning novel.
Yeah.
So it's an important piece. And I thought I was actually blown away by it because I think not only was the production absolutely gorgeous with incredible video projections, Bartlett Sher directed, and I
Right.
think it's bar none his best production as an opera director because I
Right.
had seen him do the Robert Downey Jr. play, also in
Yeah.
Lincoln Center. It also used, I mean, that one was excellent. I hadn't seen him in that context as a theater director. I thought he was great, but in opera, I always felt that he struggled a little bit with finding the balance between
Mm.
pacing and what he was trying to do as a visual artist. But here, I think he nailed it. And I think also what really helped was that the piece itself, um, by Mason Bates, the music
Yeah.
was very cinematic. I think at times it took on tones of an older Hollywood movie, and then it kind of felt Philip Glassy in other moments. And I think it really meshed very well with what was going on stage. I always felt the opera was moving forward. I thought it was actually really well written vocally as well. I thought it had an
Yeah.
incredible cast of singers. But the piece, the way that that's what always fails me with a lot of contemporary opera, where I don't feel that the vocal writing. I feel like a lot of the times the vocal writing feels like an afterthought, and I know it
Right.
isn't. I know that these composers are rigorous and that they spend a lot of time composing their pieces and thinking about everything, but oftentimes it feels so calculated and overthought that the audience itself doesn't have enough time to really. The audience is never going to process that stuff unless they're going back and watching and listening to the opera dozens of times. You know, it's not
Right.
going to be as intricate as they you're never going to get those intricacies unless you're going and listening to this opera over and over again. And if
Right.
you don't have music to latch onto, you just have no, at least in my case, no motivation to do so. But in this case, I thought that the vocal lines were so well written. um a lot of the music stayed with me. I thought it was very beautiful, and I was very happy with the experience. I'm upset that they didn't do a live in HD for this one
But,
in particular.
but there's apparently on the website it says they're recording two performances, so maybe there will be a recording for PBS or something like that.
Well,
So
hopefully.
I did hear some of the arias, and I actually was very surprised by some of the music. And I there was a recording that was on YouTube that I listened to, and there was a couple of things that I thought was really were really beautiful. I wish I would have been able to see it. Fortunately, my schedule doesn't allow it to happen.
Yeah.
In a revival, hopefully.
Yeah, well, hopefully that's the key, right? Because this was also like, I know that they performed it at, I think it was Indiana
It
University.
was Indiana University, and
This
it was
was
supposed to
the
go to LA.
this is the big premiere at a major opera company. So hopefully, and I think reviews were generally pretty positive.
They
So
were. They were. I think there
so
was like maybe one or two negative reviews, but then again, it's never going to be perfect.
well, and I mean, hopefully the box office did okay, and hopefully the
And
piece will get censored.
I did see the box office was actually very good, so maybe we'll get a revival soon, and I will definitely
Hopefully.
we'll go see it.
Hopefully, I definitely think it's worth it. I definitely think it's an opera that I don't think it's perfect, but and I think it gets a little sluggish in its second half because its first half is very uplifting and very energized. I think the
Right.
second half has a lot of threads. It's very dark in the second
Yeah.
half. So it does kind of struggle a little bit to manage a lot of that darkness with the contrast of the light of so much of the light in the first half. But still, I think it's a really good piece, and it's not that long either. So I think that that also helps it. And then
Yeah.
a week later, I saw Turandot that I thought was quite excellent. Um,
And
it
that was
might
with
probably,
Michael Fabiano, and that was Angela Mead and Masaban Rangwasha, who was making her Met debut.
and all of them were fantastic. I have to say. I have to say, all of them were fantastic. I thought it was a really good cast. You know, it's definitely his production. What was really fascinating about the experience for me that I think I don't often take or appreciate, the theater was pretty well sold. At least in the orchestra section, there was a
Orchestra
lot
part.
of, it was pretty packed. I was surrounded by people that had clearly never either gone to an opera at the Met or
Mhm.
had not seen Turandot.
Yeah.
So every single time the curtain rose and you saw the big epic set, like especially Act Two, right, where you
Right.
have the ping pong pang scene and then the curtain rises to go show us the palace, and you always get the applause and people in awe. But what I
Right.
was getting on
Exactly.
top of that was I was getting live audience reactions of people whispering amongst themselves about how amazing this was. You know, I had a couple, I don't know if they were a father and daughter, but they were sitting next to me, and you know, there was constantly like this, like I think it was her, for her this was like her first opera experience, and she was kind of like in awe and shock, and he's like, you gotta wait for the next, you know. And I don't think I think he'd seen it before, but he hadn't seen it in a long
Right.
time.
Right.
And
Right.
in front of me there was another couple, and they were constantly kind of, I don't think they'd ever gone to an opera before, and behind me was the same thing. So it was really fascinating to see how this production that is very old, um is very old, I
Yeah.
think it's what, 40 years old or something like that,
Don't
in
remember
the
the
80s.
actual
It's from the
date.
80s.
Yeah. I think
um
so.
it still has that kind of visceral impact of grand opera for people that, especially the people that haven't seen it. It
Right.
kind of like, it shocks them, and then people were just stunned. And you see the people that haven't gone before, they want to grab that picture of that set before the
Of
curtain drops at
course.
the
Of
end
course,
back
you
to
want
when they
it.
bring it back. Everyone was, it was, you could feel it, and that's where you get really excited about. And obviously when you have a really good cast as well. But even like right after the Nessun Dorma, you know, usually they start applauding during the, or either, I mean,
Vincero,
obviously always
Vincero.
after that, but during the orchestra's kind of coda. But here, like right after he let go of that high B, they went crazy. They went crazy and they kept applauding, you know, and the orchestra stopped. It usually stops for the applause, but they were applauding through the entire orchestra coda, and then they kept applauding, and some people were shouting "Bis, bis, bis." They wanted him to do it again. He didn't, but you could see the energy was charged, and it was a very good performance. And I came away very satisfied with everyone in the cast. There were some interesting musical idiosyncrasies here and there, but anyways, I thought it was a very solid performance. Carlo Rizzi was conducting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really great. It was a very good cast, and I'm really happy that I got an opportunity. I hadn't seen Turandot in some time, so
Yeah.
this was a good opportunity to
Well, you
see
saw
it.
it in February, Dave.
Did I?
You did at the Deutsche Oper Berlin with Sayo Hernandez.
I'm talking about the Met production. Talking about the Met production.
It's
Yes.
interesting because of talking about audiences and at the Teatro San Carlo after E Colorido Campo and Moro Ma Prima at the two soprano arias. I think I had never heard ovations like that in years, where literally the audience wouldn't stop applauding. It was incredible to hear such an amazing response from that audience. But that being said, on Monday, when I went to see October 6th, when I went to Sonambula, and this is my opinion. Obviously, I know a lot of people really like Sonambula. We were not going to get too into it, but I wasn't a big fan of it. But what I will say is that there was a young audience and there's a very enthusiastic audience. So I think that's really great for opera. Regardless of whether I liked it or not, I don't think my opinion should be the end all. What's most important is that if people are enjoying the works and that they're actually like enthusiastic about what they're hearing and seeing, then that's also a win for opera. And in this case, the both soloists got rousing ovations. I particularly would have loved to see Ricardo Frizza also get an amazing ovation, which he didn't quite get. And I know people criticized him for his slow tempi, but we won't get into that. I think Ricardo Frizza, in my opinion, is the best bel canto conductor. Um, yeah, that we currently have, and I hope that at one point, when he comes back to the Met, he's able to do a critical edition of an opera with no cuts and a way that we can actually rediscover these works because he's done such amazing critical editions, and he's really when I've heard some of his performances, whether it was Lucrezia Borgia at the Donizetti Opera Festival, or it was Belisario, or it was Anna Bolena, which I never heard without cuts. I feel like I was listening to the opera for the first time, and I want that experience when I'm listening to a bel canto opera. I don't want to hear cuts in a bel canto work, and so I would hope that Fritza is given that opportunity to come to the Met and actually rediscover a work and not give us a chopped up version because of time or because of production doesn't permit. And if in that case, also because of singers or whatnot, we really need to bring singers who know this repertoire and that can really give us um, can really help us rediscover these works in a way. Because if we don't cut Wagner, we shouldn't cut Bellini or Donizetti or Rossini, and that's where I will leave it.
All right. I mean, I think there's a lot of arguments as to why that's been performance practice, but we've talked a lot about our recent opera experiences, and we do have more coming up. I'm seeing La Boheme at the Met in a couple of weeks, with an
With
exciting
Juliana
young.
Gregorian and Freddie Di Tommaso, and obviously like they're very exciting. And obviously Fidra Shimont with Aaron Morley and Lawrence Brownlee, and of course they've made a big deal about Sandra Oh being in the cast, and I think that's wonderful. But I think it's really more interesting that Aaron Morley finally gets to step into a bel canto role, and Lawrence Brownlee, he's obviously a very famous Tonio, and he's really amazing at his. He can dispatch those high seas like any
Yeah.
day every week, so that's exciting.
Yeah. So when we do next month, we'll probably catch up on those
We
experiences.
will.
But now we're gonna kind of shift over to talk about two big news stories over the last few weeks,
Month and a
months.
half.
Where do you want to start? In Europe or at the Met?
Well, let's start at Europe. We're in Europe already, so we're gonna go to Europe. September 23rd, the Teatro La Fenice announced its new music director, um, which has sparked quite a controversy. Her name is Beatrice Venezzi, and she is well known for being very close to the far right Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and so this has created quite a controversy in Italy with the Teatro La Fenice's workers going on permanent strike. and a lot of the most of the most important opera houses in the world and orchestras being sending out letters in solidarity to the workers and standing with them for the fact that what they argue is that this announcement was done without any transparency, and they think it was done because she was close to Meloni. And obviously, we know that in Europe, a lot of the appointments are done by governments and by mayors and through boards, obviously, but the mayors are always part of those boards. And so it's quite caused a lot of stir between the orchestra members and, of course, um, the actual general
Ticket
direction.
subscribers. Yeah. And also ticket subscribers, right? Because apparently there
Yeah,
was a letter that went out, at least today we wrote about it. There were
yeah,
140 major ticket subscribers, penned an open letter, and there's been a petition that's been signed by thousands
yeah.
asking for the theater to reconsider its stance. One thing that you didn't mention is that her father, Gabriele
Yeah.
Venezzi, is also a former member of the neo-fascist party in
Yes.
Italy. So that's also one of the reasons why. And obviously one of the things that's also being argued is that she doesn't really have major experience. She's never conducted at another opera house, except
She's
he
never
has.
conducted at La Fenice.
She has conducted at the Teatro Colón in Buenos Aires, which
Okay.
apparently that appointment was given to her with help from the Italian consulate over there. She has never conducted at Teatro La Fenice, that's true, and apparently not at any of the major Italian opera houses
No,
or orchestras. That said, it's not like she does have experience. She has, I think
yes,
we spoke earlier, she does have a resume. It's not like she's just coming out of nowhere. And she did study at the Conservatory in Milan.
she
So
did.
it's not like it's not like she has no skill or ability. There are a lot of questions, obviously, principally because I mean I've seen one article that pointed out that this could be a sexist thing going on, misogyny. There's not many women conductors in Italy. I
No,
think only
Oksana
Oksana
Lenis
Linius
in
is the
Bologna.
only one that's ever been appointed, to be a music director at an opera house in
Right.
Italy. So this would be the second time ever, and so there is that question around whether or not Italy. This is also because she's a woman, and whether or not this explosion, that the fact that she has alliance with Meloni, or a relationship with Meloni, adds to that fuel to that fire. Obviously, there's a lot of concerns here, and
Yes.
just I just want to say this because both of our stories today are
Mhm.
are very similar. We get a lot of criticism on OperaWire for saying that opera and politics are connected in some way, shape, or form. And I'm not going to go into the fact that Verdi himself was writing opera amongst a major political upheaval in Italy, and that he was inspirational for that political movement in many
He's
ways.
also a
But
politician.
he was also a politician. But I will also just bring up the fact that opera companies are public entities, but they can
Right.
also be political ones. And the two stories we're touching on today bear that out. This one in particular, the big issue is that they don't want politics in
Right.
opera. And people are angry that an opera that politicians might be forcing their preference onto an opera company. For what purpose? Maybe
But
propaganda.
don't forget that the Italian mayors are always part of these boards at every major opera house. So no matter what, there's already going to be, because don't forget, Italian opera houses are funded by the government. So therefore, it's impossible for that to not to be connected, and so therefore, when we talk about, Venice, we talk about La Scala, we talk about Parma, which also is just selected. We talk about Rome. We talk about these major opera houses, and I particularly named some of the more important because obviously Venice, Rome, La Scala, Napoli are probably the most important and the
Preponderant, yeah.
biggest in Italy. And so for La Fenice to name this conductor, I mean, there was a conversation that I was having, and part of the thing I think it is problematic is, you know a lot of the times when conductors are selected, they've actually been to these theaters, they've conducted, they have a relationship with the orchestras, they have a relationship with the performers and the company. In this case, it just feels like Venezzi was brought in because she is friends with Meloni or whatever it was. I don't know what the circumstances
Well,
were, but
that's what propitiates all of this, right? Because people can't think of any other reason for this. Again,
oh
we
yeah,
can bring in the I think we can have the conversation about sexism, but I think if we take
Right,
it back and say, okay, fine, like let's not go there yet. Let's just
right.
assume what's the issue here, right? Because she doesn't have a relationship with the theater,
No.
and because she is a friend with Meloni, and because there's no other justification for they haven't really justified. I don't think anyone at the theater has made a compelling case. This is the same thing with the Valery Gergiev situation, by the way.
Well, and
No one
that's
ever made a
exactly what I'm
compelling
saying.
case why any of this made why that was necessary or why she is the one that has to conduct at this company. Now, there's another issue that we need to discuss in a larger view. And in in the European houses, we constantly see this, musical chairs of the same people running the organization. So obviously, when any opera company of that caliber makes some sort of, and again, at Teatro La Fenice, I also believe, you know, is one of those upper echelon houses. When one
Right.
of these upper echelon houses goes out of the norm or goes outside of the expected, you are going to see some pushback. So
Right,
when
but
you
I think, like, for example, it was surprising to see someone like Jakob Hirsch become the Royal Opera House's music director. But at the same time, he's conducted there. He has experience. He's up and coming and a well-known conductor. Or Speranza Scapucci becoming the principal guest conductor. Well, she's conducted at the Royal Opera House. She has a relationship with them. So, and like also at the Met, like, Daniele Giustini, sorry, was named the principal guest conductor. Well, this is a conductor that's made a lot of really great performances at the Met, so it makes sense. But when you have no experience with the actual opera house, well, it just makes no sense. Now, if she conducted at La Fenice and she started a relationship 2 years ago and she's done a couple of performances, then I would say, yeah, that's fine. But she hasn't, and that's where I have a problem with it. I think that you're allowed to have new up and coming conductors, and you can get rid of you not get rid of, but you can start moving the new generation. But we also have to understand that these conductors that are being named at certain places, they've already established relationships, and also they've had a track record, and you could look at their resumes and where they've conducted here, they've conducted there. Maybe they've also moved from smaller houses to the bigger houses, and that's also something where I feel is lacking, where I think that maybe Venezia is a very great conductor. I've never seen her. I've never heard her conduct, so I can't really talk about her artistic level. And I think that would be wrong for me to say she's a bad conductor. But I think if we're gonna talk about naming a music director, that music director should have an established relationship with the company, with the management, and the artists that are around there. And that's my opinion.
Yeah. No, it'll be interesting to see how the situation plays out long term because obviously this has been going on for quite some time now. Like I said, we just had an update on the news story
Yep.
today, and this started back on September 23rd. So it's going to be interesting because she's supposed to start in 2026.
Yeah.
So it's not like she's gonna come in right now and she's the person. But it's gonna be ongoing until they make a decision or they push her on, and it'll be interesting to see if they don't retract the decision like they did with Valery Gergiev's concert. This is obviously very different circumstances, but Italy has had a tendency of generating interesting controversy in recent years, as they seem to be, I don't know, and then maybe this is very much about the government imposing its will on the theater. So we'll see how that plays out. The
I
other,
just
yeah,
also wanted to add one thing before we close this section was that one of the performances, the audience members threw a bunch of papers during a performance in the orchestra, and they were applauded by the orchestra as a way of protest. So we've already started to see protests even by the audience.
wow. Well, another situation that happened over the last few weeks, and it's happened a little bit before. The Metropolitan Opera signed a curious deal with the government. Well, not the government of Saudi Arabia, but definitely its music. I believe it's his music ministry
I'll look at
or
right now.
culture ministry.
Yes, it was with the Saudi Music Commission and the Royal Diriyah Opera House that will see the Met become the resident
Okay.
winter company of Saudi's new Royal Diriyah Opera House upon its completion.
So, just for some context, Saudi Arabia has had this human rights issues for a long time. Obviously, human rights against women, LGBTQ community, and I think a journalist, Jamal Khashoggi, was assassinated for speaking out against the crown prince and the
Right.
policies of the government. And they've been, I mean, this is a very rich, wealthy country, and they've been spending a lot of money over the last few years to prop up their soccer football league, buying up some of Europe's major superstars for exorbitant, ridiculous fees, 500 million, you name it. It's insane. And now, And we know that in a couple of years, they're working on a big opera house, and they've been trying to bring ties with Western countries to try and legitimize their cultural,
The, the,
sorry.
the Teatro La Scala had actually tried to sign a deal with them in 2019, and they got caught in hot water because they were going to get $15 million from the Saudis, and they ended up having to cancel that deal because it was very controversial. And so now to see the Metropolitan Opera, the house that has basically talked about human rights for the past 3 years, famously, obviously fired Anna Netrebko for her quote unquote
Russian
ties
ties.
to Putin, which we don't even know. We obviously there's no legitimacy to that argument either. And so now we have a general director who, speaking about human rights for 3 years, and all of a sudden decides to throw away his own morality for the sake of a deal that will save the Metropolitan Opera. Because as we know, they have taken out a bunch of money from their endowment because of poor business decisions. They are right now with two lawsuits, two known lawsuits, with one with Netrebko and the other one with Anita Rashvilishvili, and their ticket sales have been not good for the past few seasons. He's blamed it on the president of the United States because of the lack of tourism. We could obviously say that maybe that's true, but even so, um, it just feels like it's a bunch of hypocritical nonsense, particularly when he went on the New York Times and said that he can't really go on to everyone's personal ideas and personal motivations, which kind of spoke to me as hypocrisy because for the past 3 years, he's been with this whole Netrebko scandal, and it just feels more personal than it actually feels like something that is meant to be political. So when he talks about people shouldn't be so scandalized by this deal and that he can't look at everyone's personal things, then maybe he should also do the same thing and bring back all the singers that he's fired, because he's clearly done it for personal reasons and not because he actually cares about human rights, in my opinion, at this point.
Well, I think that aside, if we look at it from more of a business perspective, I don't understand the potential backlash of the Saudi Arabia move in the context of, so if it's $100 million, and obviously the Mets, the resident company, they're going to be performing there every year. I'm guessing that Saudi Arabia is covering those costs as well. $20 million. The Mets annual budget is over 300 million,
Yeah.
closing in on 400. So you're not even like 10%. You're not even close to 10% of your budget.
No.
For the potential backlash that this could cause you, I don't understand the business deal because it doesn't fully solve their problems. My guess is that he's going to test the waters. It's a five-year deal, and also I feel like Saudi Arabia. I mean, I think they put 55 million into the Pompidou, the Central Pompidou in
Right.
Paris, to help with the renovations there. It feels like Saudi Arabia has put more money into other projects in the West. This felt like a very small deal for them. I'm guessing that Gelb is going to try and see how this works out over 5 years, and then potentially, because he got an extension with this, by the way.
He did. He
He
got an extension
there's
for
any
3 more years.
questions about how long he's if there's any questions about how long he's going to be here, he's definitely going to be here until 2030. He's closing in on his 30-year anniversary with the company. He would be 6 years out of from that if once
Right.
he finishes this deal. It's going to be 24 years for him. But I guess that when this deal's done in 5 years, my guess is that either it's going to have been no one's going to care, no one's going to bat an eyelash. It's also the timing is perfect because Saudi Arabia is about to start doing some, like I said, the opera house is opening up in
Right.
2030, and the World Cup is coming in 2034. So obviously Saudi Arabia, he's probably gonna wait and see where we are in the world and whether or not they go for a bigger deal down the line.
Well, perhaps
Um,
maybe he should talk to his LGBT contingent and all his LGBT performers and ask them how they feel, because as far as we're concerned, and again, and I'll extend once again the invitation to Peter Delb on this podcast, I'd love to hear him talk about what does he feel about the LGBT community, particularly when it is a crime to be LGBT in Saudi Arabia. And I'd love to hear what he has to say about women's rights in Saudi Arabia, because I do think that you can't possibly say that it doesn't matter when it actually does. When, particularly right now in America, the LGBT community is being persecuted, and now you're going to do a deal with another country where it's illegal. I think it's absolutely wrong. And for me, this hits personally, and it angers me in a way that unfortunately I don't want to feel it, but I do, and it's not right to even go and say that you can't look at people's personal ideas and personal yeah. It's very it's very saddening that a company that I absolutely love, because you know I love the Metropolitan Opera. I grew up going to the Metropolitan Opera and going to see opera in this company. But I think that this management needs to go, in my opinion, because it is now completely doing a disservice to one of the communities that actually supports opera, and that's the LGBT community. It's doing a disservice to the LGBT performers. It's doing a disservice to women. It's doing a disservice to a lot of communities that are persecuted in Saudi Arabia. Now, a country is allowed to change. A country is allowed to be able to develop and change their laws and stuff. But I want to see that change before those deals are made. And that's the reason
Fair.
why I didn't. That's the reason why I didn't go. That's the reason why I didn't support the Qatar World Cup. Didn't watch any of it. It's the reason why today I actually feel a remorse for having actually watched the Russian World Cup, because I think that it was wrong of anyone to have gone to Russia to go and support that. And anything that goes against the LGBT community is an attack on me as a person, an attack on a big community. So that's just the way I feel, and I just think that um, it's unfortunate. It's very sad, and hopefully, it works out for the Mets long term. But if it doesn't, then maybe we should. Then maybe they should really look and actually care about the people that work at this company.
So, after all of that being said, I think it's a good way to wrap up this segment. It's obviously not a good situation. It's questionable. Obviously, they did it for financial reasons. I wish I don't remember the exact quote, but Gail did basically, when he was questioned about the human rights situation, he did kind of just shrug it off and say,
He said, all the democratic governments that I know are engaged in business with Saudi Arabia. I have to put the survival of the institution of the Met first. I don't operate the Met according to my personal feelings on every issue. His personal
"Well,
issues have become the Met's personal issues for the past 3 years. As
I
I've
will,
always stated,
I will push back on that quote because what's fascinating to me, he has obviously really pushed the Ukraine situation, and I think we're all in agreement with supporting Ukraine
of course.
amidst Russia's invasion. But if that's the case, right, it is curious the whole Anand Chipka situation because he has made it his job in a way because every opportunity he gets to go after he does to his detriment because there is a lawsuit and there is a I believe there's a restraining order on him being able to say
Not
certain
a
things.
restraining order. He can't speak about the case. It's not a restraining order, but he cease and desist. He can't talk about the case,
Right.
and that's basically
Anyways,
what he's been doing.
my point is that he's made it such a big issue that it does, like you said before, feel very personal. And so he doesn't feel, and if he was really putting the Met before his own personal issues, she's probably going to sell out the house every single time. She was selling out the house every single time. So it feels a little bit like, and I want to just jump on one little quick thing. I don't think Gelb is a particularly good manager. I think that his job is really hard. And we've talked about him many times. I think that the problem is the moment he opens his mouth, he tends to put his foot in his mouth, as some people might say. Um, for example, I'm just going to bring this up because I forgot to mention it. I think I loved the Cavalier and Clay performance, but one of the moments that did stand out to me was so at the beginning of the opera season, Gelb comes out and he always has something to welcome to the audience, whatever. It's never the most exciting moment, but it's fine. He's a general manager. He's the face of the company. He's going to speak. He did say something. He said, here at the Met, we stand for the freedom of artistic expression. Everyone got up, gave him an ovation, blah, blah, blah. It was great. It was actually a good moment for him, especially in the light of the Jimmy Kimmel situation that was happening at the same time. But then he did something that I think speaks to the fact that he never knows when is enough is enough. He invited Chuck Schumer on stage. Now, again, I don't want to go crazy with politics, but Chuck Schumer right now is not the guy that I see as a freedom fighter. Sure, he leads the Democrats in the Senate. Sure, he's a long-serving tenure, a very long-serving senator. But in terms of charisma, I don't think that he's the guy who's going to get you pumped up and amped to win. And especially
No.
in this particular moment in time, people were booing him. People were yelling at him. People were saying, "Go do something about it." People were angry. And most of the people in that audience jumped up to give Peter Gelb a standing ovation for what he said about artistic expression. Chuck Schumer said nothing. At least I didn't understand. He said a lot of things, but I didn't understand what his purpose for being there was. And in that context, I asked myself, what is the Met thinking by bringing this guy here? You already said what you needed to say, and I think everyone agreed with that. And the opera itself, this particular opera, said as much, if not more, to artistic expression. So to
Well,
have Chuck Schumer was just a bad move all around. It was very awkward. It was very, if you were not a Democrat in the audience, if you're not more liberal minded, if you were not more progressive minded in the audience, you were probably angry that this guy that you probably hate was there. And clearly the rest of the audience didn't appreciate his. I didn't appreciate him, and I'll be frank, I'm very liberal. I have voted for him. I did not appreciate his appearance there because I feel like he said nothing. It was virtue signaling to the max. And that's where I say, like, this management does not always have the pulse of its audience or the next audience that they're trying to constantly court. So
or just the central fact is they talk about, oh, nothing political. The audience doesn't want to hear politics, but they constantly bring in politics, and their politics are so hypocritical. They get to a point where it doesn't make much sense. And talking about politics, we're actually going to talk about an opera that is all enshrouded in politics, aren't we?
yes, so now let's shift over to our opera of the month after much heated conversations around these news items. And the opera of the month is Verdi's Don Carlo, which both of us really love. It's a very unique piece. It is one of Verdi's best operas. And
Mhm.
by the way, if you're a Patreon subscriber, our special episode is one in which Francisco and I rank our top 10 Verdi operas. So if you want to know where Don Carlo ranks, if it ranks, spoiler alert, it ranks, where it ranks on our personal lists. You can check out that episode. But Verdi's Don Carlos is a very unique work. We've seen it many times over
Yes,
our lives. I know it's one of your favorites,
it
spoiler alert.
is. It is.
And I just think that it's definitely one of the. I've heard it described as Verdi's most Shakespearean opera, even more so than his Shakespeare pieces.
Right.
It has, I mean, every single time I watch it, I'm just like, it's just so good because the
Yeah.
drama is so good. And I have a preference for the 5-act Italian version with the Fontainebleau scene. I'm not as in love with the French version. I saw the Mets take on the French version, which isn't really the real French version. I've heard the
I'll call it the
recording of
Yannick version.
I've heard the French version, the recordings. I think there's a Ramon Vargas DVD
There is.
performance of the actual French version. I don't love it because I don't love. I don't think that the music. I think when Verdi went back and edited the piece for the Italian 4-act Italian version and then reinserted the Fontainebleau scene, I think that's Verdi at his best musically. It's much more Italian though.
Right. I mean, but there's interesting versions too because James Levine added that prelude, which I absolutely adore, and I would keep it in. And then the Papano went to Salzburg and did this. I don't even know what you call that version, where there's the scene between Eboli and Elisabetta where they're switching the mask, their
Yes,
masks before the
that's the
garden scene, which is also kind of was an odd choice to add that in, and then also change the ending as well. And that version's amazing.
and he reinserted the Miserere scene as
He
well.
reinserted the Miserere as well. So there's a lot of versions. I don't think there's I mean, I don't really feel like there's a definitive version. Obviously the ones that Verdi left, but then everybody has kind of like done their own thing with it. I agree. I don't love the 4-act version. That I know that's the final version, if I'm not wrong.
That's
Um,
the Come Scritto da Riccardo Muti recorded.
and also Chailly, because Chailly also did that
Right.
one as well, and that was his critical edition that he did Alas de la Scala. And I think that that version lacks that Fontainebleau and lacks that development because, of course, Elisabetta and Don Carlo have those. two duets, but with the third duet, you completely understand their journey and their
Yeah.
entire story. And missing that Fontainebleau does chop up their plight.
Yeah, it's that's that first the four act version, Verdi's choice to kind of bring all that together in Don Carlos aria, is it's not enough. You know,
No,
it's not enough. It's the contrast between the duet that Elisabetta and Don Carlo have in Fontainebleau
yeah,
and their first duet in the second act. Um, that contrast is what makes the journey so compelling, and that also it's really important because the opera is called Don Carlo. Once you get rid of that opening scene, it very much does not feel like Don Carlo. In fact,
no,
it's very challenging because once you get rid of that opening scene in the other four acts, I mean, Evoli takes on more preponderance as an agent of plot. Filippo arguably becomes the central figure in the opera. Even Elisabetta gets diminished quite a bit. And then
he
obviously
does.
Rodrigo's actually the one that's moving the plot for most of the piece. So Don Carlo kind of just becomes a very passive guy who's just, you know, sulking and complaining and whining and having a really hard time. And then he suddenly becomes a hero at the end. Whereas adding that Act One Fontainebleau scene kind of gives us a lot more context for
Right.
that journey. You know, we understand why he's suffering. We understand his hopes. We understand his dreams. We understand why he feels the way he feels. And so for me, it's always super important that any production of that opera have that first scene just so I can feel it. Otherwise, it
Okay.
doesn't feel like Don Carlo in four acts. And I'm always curious. I mean, I know it's for length too, because it is a very long opera. I'm always very curious that Verdi chose to slice it down that way. And I also don't love that a lot of theaters still do the
Use
four
them.
act
And
version.
they're using it more and more now. I mean, the Met just did it also, and they never did the four act. Well, they did, but they in recent times they'd never done the four act version.
Yeah.
La Scala obviously did the four act version, 2023, 24. I know Modena did one too in the four act version. So it's become a lot more popular to do the four act version, and I think also um, it's hard to cast. It's really hard to cast that work because you need every major voice type, and not everyone. There's a lot. There's very rare singers now to be able to do that
Yeah.
work, to do it. So it's a work that I absolutely adore. I have a lot of really great memories with it. You and I saw the John Dexter production at the
Yeah.
Met, which I absolutely adored. And I mean, I saw two performances of that. The second one that I saw was with Dmitry Horostovsky, which
Mhm.
I think for me is the greatest
That
Rodrigo
was
that
like
I've ever seen.
Johann Botha
That was
and
Johan Botha and Patricia Rachette and Olga Borodina and Renee Papa. And Renee Papa, also an incredible Filippo. Olga Borodina, I used to love her voice, and she was just so compelling as Eboli, such an imposing presence on stage. And Patricia Rachette and Johan Botha were just they sang so wonderfully in that production. It's an unforgettable performance. Of course, James Levine conducted that performance. So it's a lot of that cast no longer exist. Actually, three of those people have already passed, and Rene Papa, he has already said goodbye to the role. He was going to do it at La Scala, but he canceled that. And then we saw the Nicholas Heitner production, which I was
yeah,
never a big fan of.
never loved it. I always felt it to be very crude, but also kind of flat.
Yeah,
Um, and that's the one I've seen the most.
yeah,
I remember a particularly infamous Lauren Mizell performance where the audience actually booed him.
yeah. It was his last opera performance.
It was sad because I don't necessarily think that he was. I mean, I don't think he was great, but it was kind of. I was kind of taken aback by how angry the
Yeah.
audience was toward him. It was very aggressive,
It
and
was
then
Ramon Vargas and it was Barbara Fritoli who were doing the lead roles, if I'm not
right.
wrong.
I mean,
And I think it was Ferruccio.
yeah, which I saw him several times doing
We saw him
that
several
role.
times, yeah, which he was
Yeah.
amazing. Role.
Young Hoon Lee was another tenor that I saw several times in that
I saw
opera.
him too.
I quite liked him as well. And then, of course, we saw the recent Met production, the French version that was more Yannick Nézet-Séguin's vision for the French version rather than the actual French version. Because to be clear, while it does have certain elements from the French version, it still uses a lot of the music from the Italian version.
Yeah,
So it wasn't really a fully committed vision of the French version.
I
You know,
actually found
obviously opera
myself
was
to I actually found myself to be a little bit uh, like upset about the fact that they promoted this as the first time the Met was showing the French version, and then what we got was just a chopped up version. And again, I don't love the French version of this work, but if we're gonna commit to doing a French version, you might as well show the entire French version. And if you can't,
I
then
think
don't do
what's
it.
yeah. I mean, I think that what was disheartening about that particular choice was that the fact that you were juxtaposing the Italian version, which is Verdi's last vision for the
Right.
piece, with earlier passages, many of which just aren't on the same level. The Rodrigo and Don Carlo duet, for example, is one that always stands out to me, as I just prefer what the revisions that Verdi made, because I just feel like the music flows a lot cleaner. But when you do that and you're contrasting with other passages, doing the French version of that, which I think is very airy and kind of doesn't lack the
Right.
directness. With other parts, it feels like a chimera musically, and it just didn't work. The production by David Mavicker, I don't dislike, but that was another thing. It was really interesting to see that, and then to see the following season, they completely did away with the dynamics between Rodrigo and Don Carlo, because obviously in the French version, there's a lot more of that
Right.
than in the Italian version. So, anyways, I haven't brought it back since.
No.
It is a great opera, and it's definitely one of Verdi's best operas. And
Yeah, and
again,
we saw La Scala too. We saw the opening night
yes,
production by Luis Pascal, which we weren't big fans of the production. I
right.
think what really saved that production was the artists involved with that.
Yes.
And I think that it's a hard opera to stage. It's a hard opera to really um to really understand how to. It's part of the ending. The ending, I think no one will ever understand.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to plug it again. If you want to hear where we place Don Carlo in our Verdi rankings, you can check out our special episode. But I think that's going to do it all for today. Want to thank our producer Dan Gomez for making this happen, and we want to thank all of you for being our captive audience. Please feel free to reach out to us on social media or via email if you have any questions, concerns. We're going to continue to work on this podcast and expand it, and hopefully we're going to have some special guests in coming episodes. So that's going to do it for today. Thank you very much, and we will see you at the opera.